Hey, beautifuls. I have a new apartment. And can we just talk about how great this lighting is? I mean, I am just loving the lighting in my new apartment. Today's video is a video with a good friend of mine, Sarah. She worked at one of the companies that does technical recruiting here in San Francisco. Here's a couple of the companies. It's sort of what they do is they give developers coding challenges, and then coders can use that to brush up on their testing skills or on their developing skills, and then they use that data to then serve up to companies that are hiring for technical roles. So the money that there is really on the hiring side. And Sarah worked at one of these companies and worked with like hundreds of brands that were trying to hire developers and like struggling to hire developers and paying tons of money to find that talent. So I got to a conversation with Sarah just off the cuff one day and started getting into this conversation. I was like, this is super interesting. Pause, let's stop talking about this so that I can shoot it on a video for you all. This is that conversation that I have with Sarah. I'm just picking her brain about how these companies go about hiring these roles and how you might be able to optimize your position to actually lock down a role like this, including potentially roles in the 90 to 120K base salary range. So let's get into the video. Hey everyone, today I've got another friend with me. This is Sarah. She's actually a coworker at my current company. We got talking about recruiting and how to get jobs, and Sarah actually has a background working with technical recruiters at a bunch of different software companies. She used to work for a tech company that did recruiting basically for these companies, so she's talked to a lot of these folks. First question I want to ask Sarah is, why should people listen to you? What is it that that you can share, or what experience have you had so far that people should listen to you for?
Yeah, kind of like you mentioned, I did have the experience of being able to work with a lot of small, medium, and large tech companies that, working directly with hiring managers, with recruiters, understanding what their different pain points are. And then in a different role, I actually run a meetup group where I bring in engineering speakers, and I get to meet a lot of software engineers that are looking for new roles, and I've kind of helped them to get positions here in the Bay Area.
Now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's called
awesome.
Bay Meetup.
Plug to Bay Meetup. If you're in San Francisco, we'll have a link in the description. Go check out Bay Meetup. I might have to go to this thing and check it out too. So while you were working in this field, so you were doing basically just fill everyone in, you were selling the software that large software companies use to then hire developers, essentially.
Absolutely. So, it really the software inserted itself into every step of the recruiting process, from screening, interviewing, both on the phone and on site.
Okay.
And so, working in technical recruiting was really exciting because there's so many open technical roles that you don't necessarily need to have a degree or even experience to get some of the roles that are available today. And I don't think a lot of people know that there's different avenues to break in.
How does someone go about approaching a technical role with no technical experience? That's basically the main purpose of this video. How does someone even start?
I think the main thing is to find, a handful of roles. So for instance, to find what discipline first that you want to break into. So if you want to go, for instance, in that you're eventually going to be building software, so you want to go into some type of software development internship, software development program where it's specifically tailored for a few months for new, engineers to get their feet wet there in that company. You'll essentially be doing like bug duty, bug fixes, testing, things like that in the beginning, but then you'll ultimately be able to convert into a full-time role.
How do you even find like an internship, or I'm assuming you're including bootcamps in this as well, or do you even not?
No, I actually would say that before you even think about going into a boot camp, first find a handful of roles that are out there that are open that you think you could potentially be a good fit for. And I would say if you feel confident that you could do 60-70% of the responsibilities, don't necessarily need to be able to do everything. You can learn on the job, but if you can confidently speak to the fact that you could probably do 50-60% of those skills, like if you can work well with a team, if you have some of the soft skills that they're looking for, then you can then focus on, to your point, going the boot camp route, working with mentorships, going into to school, for example, for a short time to pick up the more technical skills.
So if someone's interested in getting a technical role,
has zero technical experience sell the soft skill side of it?
Right. So sell whatever
Right.
skills that you have with whatever roles that you see that you do have, like that
Okay.
you can confidently say, I can cover this part of the job, and then you can learn the rest of it.
Generally, what salary range roughly would you say people were hiring for?
I would say for an entry level position where you don't have any experience, you could probably see a pretty wide range between 50 to 90K and upwards in software development and related fields. I've actually seen as much as 120K with no experience. And people that were hired into those roles were self-taught developers, had really good portfolios of projects that they've built. So they didn't necessarily ever work with a client or with a company, but they actually were able to show that they can build an app, that they can work with a wide range of different technologies, and were able to get that role.
All right, so you bring up a good point. So people might be looking for a technical job with no experience, meaning like never having had a job in that, but it's still free for them to go and work on a project online and build at least one project to be able to show in the interview process. So now we're starting to paint a picture of you can sell your soft skills, your previous experience, plus whatever new app or open source project that you've contributed to, and actually provide the code of what you've done. So it's not a get out of jail scotch free card here, but it's a road for them to get to a technical role.
Absolutely. It's actually quite surprising. There's still a pretty strong bias in the technical space, both with the hiring managers and the developers you'd be working with day to day, kind of against boot camps. I'm not saying don't do a boot camp, but I would say that it would be very important to not only have a way to get that range of skills of understanding, like what is a coding language. You can do that a variety of different ways, a boot camp, online, whatever, but also understanding like how to problem solve, which is, something like the technical tools I used to work with, will help you do as a candidate. And so just being able to show the well-rounded nature of yourself as a developer, regardless of how you got your education, is pretty much the most important part of the process.
Why are some folks steering clear of boot camps, or what's going on with that situation?
I think that boot camps, and I can't paint a broad stroke because there are very many different boot camps with varying degrees of quality. Yeah. But I think boot camps, for the most part, tend to focus very heavily on learning a coding language and maybe completing one major project, leveraging that language or a couple of different technologies, where computer science as a discipline, it encompasses a lot of problem solving and the ability to find a most efficient solution. So with just learning in a very kind of elementary school method of memorize this information and put it back to use, you're not necessarily testing how well you can actually solve a problem with that approach. And so I think that a boot camp could still be a really good way, especially since a lot of camps are now providing very flexible financial assistance or financing models where you might not have to pay until you're in the job for a couple of years, or that you may not have to pay at all because an employer might pay for your education. So there is a lot of benefits to a boot camp, but there is still a really strong bias out there in the market against them. And so I would say, really make sure that you also are, working on projects and showing that you can do the work.
Do you have any specific tips? Like I know in my hiring process back when I was interviewing a couple of years ago, at the time at least, I don't know if it's still true, it was like better to use a .doc file instead of a PDF file because it was more machine searchable and like would get picked up essentially for more keywords. Is there any tips that you learned being that you were on the software side of hiring? Any like technical tips that people can leverage?
Yeah, there are a couple of great resources that I can share with you after the video. We can maybe put in the comments. As far as making sure that your document is formatted in such a way that it will stand out to recruiters. But I think optimizing for getting your resume in front of a recruiter is still not as efficient as really networking, building relationships with people that are at the companies that you actually want to work with. And those are the people who, once they see the work that you're doing, what your interest and passion is, might even intercede on your behalf, get you in front of the hiring manager, and have a much more efficient interview process overall.
Yeah, how do you get to know these people in like an organic way versus like doing what I've done sometimes, which is sort of like forcing people, you know what I mean? Like forcing my way into scenarios, which I would not recommend to anyone, especially if you're in the job search process, because people don't like it. How would you do it in a more likable way?
Yeah, I think that, if you're in an area like the Bay Area where there is a lot of tech meetups, where there's a lot of opportunities to just like meet and collaborate with people, I would say get as much face time as you can just with anybody that's in the space. So going to hackathons, going to tech meetups like the Bay meetup, like going anywhere where you can meet engineers that have like a varying level of experience, and then just like talk to them and just kind of feel out if they'd be willing to share what their background is, and like joke with them, have a good time. Like, don't be overly serious or studious with your approach. I think, just coming at it more casually and just saying, oh, what are you up to? Once you get to know, like, what company you're on. Oh, I heard that you guys are doing something, maybe having some kind of background about or context about who some of the attendees are, so you have some talking points. Yep. And that kind of brings me to another tip, which is really being aware of like what's happening in the software industry in general. If that's the role that you want, you really want to make sure that you are reading different articles, blogs, have a regular subscription to newsletters, email newsletters that are in that space, so that when it comes time for you to actually talk about the space at large, you have a basic understanding of like who are the players, who's getting acquired, who's going public, what those things mean.
Yeah.
That's also important if you're going to make some kind of like organic conversations, that you have something that they'll actually care about, of like, so how's that Uber stock doing,
Right. So, and this actually circles back to a question I wanted to ask, which is some of you mentioned earlier, people should pick their lane essentially. They will be a front-end developer, back-end developer, maybe even specifically a certain type of language, Python or whatever. How would you recommend someone go about those choices? Like, how can they do that?
I guess it really comes full circle to what we were just talking about in terms of building projects that kind of show what your skill sets are. Because if you're not really sure like what kind of direction you want to take your career, if you start working on a bunch of really small projects that leverage these types of technologies, you might start to get a feel for, okay, this kind of resonates with me. Like, I love the aspect of impacting the user experience, or I love the aspect of making sure that the software is secure and running fast. Like, so those kind of things might allow you to start to see, okay, like, where do you have a stronger interest? And then I would say, like, go as deep as you can into that particular
Did you see any companies
that you have
trending towards hiring certain roles or technical abilities versus others?
Yeah, I would say that most companies are really looking for a full stack capability, so and the ability to pick up new languages and technologies very quickly. So it is good to be well-rounded. I think that if you decide that you really want to go into front end and you have a deep expertise in that, and you continue to deepen your expertise in that, it can get you actually closer to that kind of full stack mentality, because once you have a certain mastery in that, it would be not too hard to then start to pick up the things that are there in the back end, because you would understand how, like, the computer science movement in general.
I have my own opinions on machine learning and AI. Did you see people hiring specifically for those things? So really, and what type of person gets hired for that? Is it someone who's like an expert scientist with a master's degree, or is it someone who was no experience coming in from working on like self-taught projects?
I do know one self-taught developer that did make it into the AI field, but he essentially worked freelance for 3.5 years, so didn't necessarily come at it completely cold, but definitely didn't have any kind of
too.
And definitely did work on his network, but he did not come in it cold, and he essentially like didn't really have any formal training at all. Okay. So it's possible, but it's very challenging in that specific line of work, just because it's so nuanced, and it's getting much more sophisticated as time goes on, and so it's a little bit harder specific field to kind of like break into with no experience at all.
Is it different, or would you recommend pursuing non-technical roles at tech companies?
I think that those non-technical roles are obviously going to be much easier to break into than a technical role, because it's much more soft skills driven. And so someone like me, who has no degree, who came at it with experience in a relevant field but not direct experience in software sales, like, it's much easier to get a software sales job than it would be to get a technical job with no experience.
Awesome. Any last ideas that you want to add, or plugs if you want to plug your like Instagram, or I don't know what you got going on?
I think the biggest thing is really just like put yourself out there, and to like, if you share your interests and your passions with people and you go out and meet people online, meet people, you know, offline, I think that's really what's going to allow you to break into a new career, just by making those connections and being willing to like take risks. If you want to find out more about me, I'm on Instagram at Sora Johnston, LinkedIn, Facebook. You can pretty much find me like anywhere online. Super passionate about the future of work and all the like new jobs and opportunities that the internet's kind of creating for all of us.
You cool if people DM you with like
totally.
hiring questions, that sort of thing? Because that's what happened with the last video. People are
go for it.
Hitting up my buddy Jimmy from the last video we did. So, all right, sweet. Thanks for doing the video, Sarah.
Yeah, sure thing.
All right, now let's fix a different problem. Look at this. All right, I appreciate that my YouTube channel is growing. That's cool, and to a degree, I don't mind that 95.7% of the views on my channel are unsubscribed. Subscribe to the channel. Seriously, I appreciate, love you guys. You don't have to subscribe. I don't mind. I don't care either way, but I just think it's funny that 95.7% of you all aren't subscribed. Bye.